allow me to introduce Corona Samazdad's latest publication. I received it yesterday evening, and it will be available to order by tomorrow. I have to do a little computer work. I'll put it on Goodreads tomorrow. Stravia. Wait, no, you're supposed to say that. Sorry. Uh, I didn't think I was going to have any problems with this YouTube today because I'm speaking very enthusiastically about Decreation, a book of short stories by Roberto Segroff that he, there's his name right there, that he translated from the Spanish original himself. There's a story about how this book came about and what's been done with parts of it since then. I posted on here a film that was the polishing of what we produce, we presented at the Prague Micro Festival, which I'm going to read my introduction because here's what. No, there's something I want to say first. I don't know, and maybe if anybody can tell me whether this has ever been done. Has anybody ever written about the physiological effects of great art? It doesn't have to be fiction. It could be music, which I think it is more commonly known to have currency, or whatever, however you'd say it. Listening to classical music sometimes can be really, really exciting. And I mean, when something just hits at the right time, think Shostakovich's first or second violin concerto, the second movement, where the a lovely melody kind of breaks into absolute chaos, kettle drums, pumping, thumping, whatever, and then it resolves somehow into an extraordinary circular, beautiful something. That's one thing. I had, and this happens to me now and then, I had a very strong physiological reaction to the manuscript as I was reading it. I was wise enough to print it out so I could read it out here. And I was reading it out here, and I got about halfway through, and I was just so excited by it that I had to get up and immediately start writing an introduction. And it's not a long introduction, so I think it's okay if I read it here. The book, by the way, is, look, here's the table of contents, which is very interesting. Introduction by me, and then at the end, the story that I've already referred to, that we've done some film work with the narration by predominantly Roberto Segroff. Not the narration, the reading of the story. We only got 2 pages or so of the story into the film, and well, anyway, the rest of the stories have no titles, but here's the story of the book, in a way, and a little bit of an appreciation. I was thinking I should probably spend a little time thinking how I would present to you what is so great about this book, but then I got lazy and inspired at the same time. Now that's not oxymoronic as it may seem. Laziness can produce greatness. I think Hannah Arendt was someone who used to spend an hour a day laying down on her couch about midday, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, just thinking. Now that is a great way of combining the intellectual with the lazy, the physiological. I wrote a book called The Manifold Destiny of Eddie Vegas. Philip Friedenberg wrote me back when that was how you had to order books from Corona Samizdat. He wanted me to send him a copy of Eddie Vegas. He soon told me he was going to write a book about a man waiting for that book, mine, to arrive. I said, good. He said, well. And he wrote like a madman for 6 months, creating America and the Cult of the Cactus Boots, which became a sort of creature that sought out suitable clients for its own cult. The book went to Colombia, where it found Adolfo Villafuerte, some say because he was at the time the tallest writer in Bogota. Villafuerte knew that there was some kinship between Cactus Boots and his friend Roberto Segroff, particularly because of Segroff's recently published metafictional Anatomia del Abismo. He arranged to order a copy of Cactus for Segroff. This led to a certain atomic relationship between the two writers of Bogota and a vein of literature running through Buffalo, New York, and Isla, Slovenia. Corona Samizdat published a novel each by Villafuerte and Segroff in Spanish. Because Villafuerte's novel, Entre Lunas, was much shorter, it was the one that attracted a translator. That English version is coming out soon. Soon it will be published in English. Okay. Yeah. Soon I will send Segroff an unopened box of copies of Anatomia del Abismo. Copies, I say. Books that reach people are spoken of as singular items. The America and the Cult of the Cactus Boots is the singular of that book, which ends in a plural. Segroff must never refer to Anatomia del Abismo as a book. It remains in the plural. Because of his height, perhaps, it is known that Villafuerte was in the United States, specifically New York, for about half a year. Segroff remained sequestered in Bogota. That is the end of the story I have to record here. Disembodiment appears to be both a quality of Segroff and a concept that has seized his writing mechanism, which he has willed to a specialist in performing autopsies on writers who we have, I presume, all more or less become aware of. A ghostly figure, well over 100 years old, who emerged from the jungles of Bogota sometime after the Enlightenment to learn various sciences and who knows what to look for within the corpse of a writer. Remaining in Bogota, Segroff nonetheless inserted his fictional habits, take that both ways, into my life, as well as the environs where I allow my life to roam, centered in Isla, Slovenia. He wrote a story in Spanish that awoke one day in English and leapt like a certain mythical bat-like creature from Indian literature called a Vetala, which hangs upside down from a tree and inhabits bodies under various conditions which may account for the events described herein. I say it leapt like a Vetala onto the cinema screen, where it was captured in a fragment that appears to have been but the first 2 pages of a story that mocks an unfinished film called Portrait of a Man Drowning. The story was called Portrait of a Drowning Man. Yet the story bled into a fragment of its inherent multiplicity. And I mean that, which is one of the marvels of his work. In the story, a Segroff-like figure, can the man hosting a Vetala be anything more than suspected of doing so? Dreams of an Isla at night and wakes in the morning to begin drawing a map of a town on his bedroom wall. At some point, he may recognize it as Isla, where he has never been. His wife takes a naive interest, suspecting nothing, and tells him it must be a coastal city. In the film, Segroff disappears. In a short film which may explain that. Or it's a short film which may explain that. What we have here in this book is the full story, Portrait of a Drowning Man, at the end of this book of short stories. We have no answers otherwise, and fewer trails to follow once we have examined Portrait of a Drowning Man. We are in contact with Segroff, but we have no idea of his aspect, his essence, his raison d'etre, if he has one. I never work hard at exegesis. Segroff appears to have at some point had something we can only understand as similar to a laboratory accident that has had a disturbing outcome, leaving him altered by fraught alchemy to become oversaturated with disembodiment. I've just received his manuscript of short stories that I believe is titled Decreation. At that point, I wasn't sure. At the same time, as soon as I typed Roberto Segaroff's Decreation, I realized that this introduction could only be this short story, and it would be a refusal to investigate his decreation. You will see why when you read his stories. I've just finished his 7th, 8th, maybe 9th story, and I was unable to go on, fearing that dislocation precedes disembodiment, and uncertain what has become of Segaroff. Avetala, he has leapt from the page and steered me into what I will call his book of concerns. I nearly wrote fascinating concerns, but my intention is not to please her, nor is it to appease myself. The concerns, I will hesitate to say, are very much a distillation of a century and a half of writing that have colonized me. Watch for the results of my autopsy. From Latin America over my decades of reading, his eyes are skewed like Onetti's. Like Borges, he has a simple map in his hand but lost his glasses, both pair. The ones he uses for finding his glasses are not properly lost, rather he stepped on them. He contains the dying melancholy ruffian and a sedated Erdosain, gifts from Roberto Arlt. He has Cortázar's fictional lope, while Villafuerte has his height. Cortázar was a very tall man. I rarely stop reading from excess of amazement. This is the physiological effect that I speak of. But for readers who prefer last lines before the autopsy, I will admit that such was the case just now. I wrote that immediately in just one sitting, because I couldn't sit still anymore. I couldn't sit still enough to continue reading. Shortly after I wrote that, I got it out of my system, and I kept reading. And it was interesting because I was charged with proofing his book, editing it if that was what I needed to do. I'm a very terrible editor, and all writers who work for me, they all, I guess they trust that to be true, because they don't ask me, will you please edit this for me, Rick? I just really need an editor. In fact, I don't know many writers who would ever say that to anybody, hey, thanks for editing that, man. Although I will say that Michael Moore, a legendary figure who actually was to some degree friends with Hunter S. Thompson, was my first editor at Fillmore Books? No, damn. What was my first publisher? Should be here somewhere. No, I can't seem to find it. This is the brain going bad. But the Steerforth Press. Yeah, he actually made my second novel with two brilliant editing ideas. I had to execute what he suggested, but and also James Allen McPherson suggested a new beginning to let's see, this book right here, The Appearance of Death to a Hindu Woman. So there have been cases where I have been saved, I think, by a brilliant but honest and uncommercial suggestion about editing. This needed no editing, and I didn't think about editing, but what I was going to get at, and the reason I just babbled on for those 2 minutes, was that there were very few mistakes in English. Very few. 2 or 3. And there was only one story that I had any comment on. I didn't like the last sentence of one story. I never checked to see if he changed it, but I'm not a forceful editor. I'll give you my opinion and you do what you want. And anyway, so the only other thing I'm going to say is, because while I was looking up here, more was going on in my brain and with my eyes. I saw this book, Bedraggling Grandma with Russian Snow by Joao Hayes. We don't have many copies left, but this one is inscribed by Joao. But I'm going to get to the reprinting of this book as a microline, and so it'll have a new cover, and it'll also say up here, one way or another, Corona Samizdat or C backslash S classics. I've decided that we're going on 5 years now. It's almost next week. It'll be 5 years running this press, and some of our books are really genuinely classics. And the first book that made me think of that was this one. But now I'm already regretting, and I'm glad that I'm going to do this one first, but at the same time, I really think this should have been published with a Corona Samizdat classic right here, because it is a classic. It's an extraordinary book of short stories, and I guess I'm going to leave it at that. This is really, and the pictures are a little bit, this one maybe even more so, spooky. And you can think, if you want to take a break while you're reading it, if you have the problem I had, if you need a break, you can just sit back and think about, so you don't have to go write an introduction. You can just sit and think about, decreation and what you've been reading and what this depicts and how that concept of decreation, whatever it means, if you can, you can enjoy an hour on the couch if that's the way you want to do it. Thank you for your attention, and wow, what a book.